Hi again, everyone. Welcome to a brand new episode of Once Upon a Turnbuckle, and this is one I really been really excited about. Firstly, I welcome back old friend of the show. You might, if you've gone through this show before, you will have heard him a couple of times. Andrew Lacelle, welcome back to this show, sir. How are you?
Not too shabs. Thanks for having me again. I'm looking forward
Yes.
to talking about the King of Sports.
Yes. I will say as well, kicking it off, I didn't realize until earlier on. Actually, you are with this appearance the record-setting guest. You are now you've three-peated, as they would have said back in the old days. You've
I
actually
feel like
this
I'm
the
Alec Baldwin on Saturday Night Live.
yes. You're the first guest to be back three times. So this is good. This is good. And it's a topic we've got at hand, which I can't believe it's taken me till now to do an episode dedicated to this. I think this show kind of went off in one direction from last time we spoke. It became quite interview and guest heavy. And this is one that I really been looking forward to getting into because it brings out the nerd, probably in both of us actually. Where we're actually going to be delving into the world of wrestling figures, action figures, which they ruled my childhood. I don't know about you, but
Absolutely.
yeah. So give us a little bit of background then for yourself, because we might be from the same kind of era. I'm not sure. Um,
I
what were
think
the
you're my young boy because
okay?
I'm 44, so I'm not sure.
Only three, yeah. So I'm 41 this year, so only 3 years. So actually,
Oh,
this
so
will
we're
be
completely different generations. I'm late X, depending on where you look at, or
this is
early
yeah.
millennial.
So this only those few years can mean a lot when we talk about this topic in terms of what we grew up with. So what was your line firstly when you were growing up?
Well, see, for me, I had seen the wrestling figures, the LJNs, in the stores, but I didn't have any interest in them because they were a little too big
Mm,
to play with my figures. I had the GI Joe size toys, which also would include the Kenner Superpowers and Dungeons and Dragons, and then the He-Man sized figures, which had a few other toy lines that you could intermingle. But I
mm,
found the LJNs just kind of stood on their own. And then I asked my grandfather to get me either Faker or Manny Faces, one of the Masters of the Universe toys I didn't have, and he
mm.
came home with this guy. And
Ah, okay.
and this is the actual one. This is when I was
Wow.
5 years old, and I opened it up, and it had that new toy smell, and I was like, you know what? I can get behind this. I don't have to just feign interest because it was a gift. I actually don't mind this. And then before you knew it, I had Iron Sheik, and then I
Wow.
had gotten Andre the Giant, and we went to our cabin, and there was a friend of the family there, and he saw me playing with him, and he goes, "Oh, you've got Andre the Giant there." And I looked up in astonishment because I didn't know these were based on real people. I thought they were like
Okay.
He-Man or GI Joe,
Yeah.
and because I'm a bit of a completist and have an addictive personality, I had to go full throttle into the wrestling, get into the
Wow.
magazines, and so on and so forth. How about
For the
yourself?
benefit of those maybe who are listening to the audio, that we're talking about the Andrew flashed up there his first figure, which was the Hulk Hogan LJN. So if you're going to go in, you're going to go in at the top. Let's get the supposedly the most popular guy back then.
Yeah,
So
plus he came
yeah,
with a belt and a little
I know.
poster. It was
Yeah,
just great.
see, the LJNs, we didn't have them. By the time we did have them. By the time I started collecting, we just got into the Hasbro range, and the LJNs I didn't see anywhere. I think in my life I've seen one anywhere in this country in any shops that I've been in back when I was a kid, and it was a Roddy Piper one. And again,
Okay.
I wasn't a wrestling fan then. I just knew there was a guy in a skirt, and I
Yeah.
wasn't too sure who he was or anything. But my cousin, my older cousin, was a massive wrestling fan, so he soon educated me. I never saw the LJNs, and I don't know sort of how much they were over here. To be honest, so it might have been something that we really missed out on.
I'm not sure. I know that WWF, their first show there was televised. So they didn't
Okay.
have TV. They had like a super card, and that was in '89. So I don't know prior to
Wow.
then, you
Yeah.
probably would have just been through magazines. I don't know
Yeah.
what the newsletters were going over there. I mean, that would be only for the hardcores, so I'm not sure.
Yeah. Yes. I mean, back then, in terms, if you saw them advertising in the magazine, getting hold of anything, I don't know. I wouldn't obviously wasn't doing it, but getting hold of anything like that from overseas would not have been like it is today. It probably wouldn't have been as easy and or cost effective even.
Yeah, I can
So,
imagine.
Did you actually manage to complete the LJN line? I missed to ask.
Just about.
Okay.
During my collecting days, um, I remember we were at the store called Towers, me and my mom, and they had the British Bulldogs, but not as a tag team set. They had individuals, and of course, I got Dynamite because, Dynamite's great.
Yeah.
And then I never saw them like that again. It was always as a tag team set, so I
Mm,
couldn't get Dynamite twice. So I didn't have Davy Boy until my adulthood,
mm,
and then I never had short-haired Andre, whether it be
okay.
with the blue trunks or the black strap. Because as a kid, you don't want the same wrestler, even if it has like different haircut
Mm,
or different gear. It's just I already have that guy. I'd rather have a different one.
yeah.
And I never had Warlord. Those were the three I
Oh,
never had.
well, okay. I keep forgetting he had one then, to be honest. Yeah. Was it Powers of Pain back then? Did they
They
have
were
both of them?
Powers of the Pain, but because it was LJN, a lot of times they were just a little off with their gear, and he
Right.
had the trunks instead of the tights, and he didn't
That's right.
have the trunks until he had became a
The
solo
single
act.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just kind of like
That's
before his
weird.
time.
That's weird. I wonder what the logic is behind some of these things sometimes. We'll get into it. I mean, I'm looking at I've just literally today started. I've got my first shipment of what's going to be my collection again. This is the first time in years that I have had any wrestling figures for no other reason other than just to have them. And I'm starting with the WCW Galoobs, and I'm looking up at Ron Simmons, and that was one of the biggest mysteries to me as to why Ron Simmons and Butch Reed were
Have their
in
sweatpants.
workout pants on, yeah, rather than with the actual tights. I think I've watched the Major Figure podcast like just literally recently where they've gone through the whole line, and I found out why.
They're in a promo photo in
Yeah,
their.
that was it. And they obviously didn't know what they were turning up for, and well, that's what you'd like to believe anyway. And the makers didn't really, they weren't really wrestling fans, so they didn't really know. They just took for granted from all these reference photos they had that were
The
given.
Simmons is the worst of the Series One Galoobs because
So
that
it's
arm
towards the
stuck to
post.
his. Yeah,
Yeah, not good. It's not good. It as a kid, it was one of my favorite. It still is looks wise one of my favorite figures because the likeness is great. I mean, the likeness with all the Galoobs are great, which is one of the reasons why I've been drawn back to them. But yeah, you couldn't do much with him at all.
yeah,
A good sort of shoulder
like elbow
tackle,
drop.
kind of, yeah. If you wanted to kind of rip off Rick Rude's Rude Awakening neckbreaker, maybe.
Yeah.
But hey ho. But for me, anyway, my personal where I started, it was very much with the Hasbros. When I first got into wrestling, again, it was off the back of my cousin. He was massive into it, so I learned a lot of it from him. And then my mum, at that point, decided she was just going to try and get me everything. It was one Christmas, and I think it was Hulk Hogan, and I got the Ultimate Warrior at the same time as well. It was the series two, I think. So it's the Hulk Hogan with the bear hug kind of motion, which
Oh,
again
yeah.
you couldn't do much with. But the Warrior was the white trunks with the Gorilla Press slam.
Certainly an improvement over the jumper
Why? Yeah,
warrior
I do not understand why he was given a jumper as his
because he had
first.
that
Okay,
splash, I guess,
I guess, but
from the canvas.
the jumpers again. If I've got one gripe with wrestling figures, that I grew up with, it was that. It was I hated all of the jumpers. I think it ruined the
Yeah,
guys with
combination of the legs being together and the
that
thing in the
thing in the
back. So
back.
you
It
like
makes it look like
Jim
a
Herd
hunchback.
style, you
Yeah.
can't pin them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised they didn't release the ding dongs. Was it them in WCW that had the ding dongs?
They did
They
have
had a
the
bit of a
ding dongs, but
hunchback.
it was a different gimmick that he had proposed that was shot down of the Hunchback who couldn't be pinned. So I guess all of
That's
his
right.
losses would be count out DQ or submissions.
Yeah. Anyway, already we're going down a bit of a rabbit hole, which is great. This is why I love talking to you because
Yeah.
we our past episodes have been really, really these are fan related. This is when we can really just kind of let things fly.
Oh, yeah, one
And
thing leads to another, it just
it's
organically
great.
flows.
It's really cool. I do enjoy these. It's been about 4 years, by the way, since we did our last one.
Oh wow,
Yeah, I know. That's a long time.
time flies, I
It
guess.
does. That was we talked about the King of the Ring again. That was a great one
Yes.
to dissect. Right. So the vague structure we've kind of gone with for today. We've each come armed with our top five wrestling figures, and there were no criteria. It didn't have to be necessarily. I mean, I know mine are ones I've owned, but they didn't necessarily need to be that. I suppose it helps if you know the figure and had some kind of connection to it. But they could come from any line. for any reason. So I'll I know my list may change as we go through. We'll see. This is going to be quite a tough one. I sat down today trying to pick five. I thought it was going to be
Hmm.
easy, but like
I'm
no.
excited.
Yeah. So we don't have to start in any kind of order. We haven't got like, a fifth to
Oh, I'm
first.
doing my order five to
Oh,
one.
okay, fine. Well, I haven't. I've just literally noted mine down as they came into my head. So, I'll try and decipher at the end of it. I'll try and decide which one is my
Mhm.
favorite. But as the guest, I think you can go first, mate. What
Sure.
have you got?
Now, like I was mentioning, I was an LJN guy, and I had no idea that they had stopped
Okay.
when that last series was released. It was released in Canada, which is where I'm from, under Grand Toys,
Mm,
and that was the series that had Boss Man, Haku, Warrior, Rude, and Andre.
okay.
And then I saw the commercials for the Hasbros, and I thought, well, these guys are a little too cartoony,
Mm,
and I didn't like that they were a little too small because I had three different wrestling figure promotions or
yeah.
federations,
Nice.
and it was the LJN style. The only other non-LJN toys that kind of fit into that were the Marshall Bravestar figures. They were pretty tall,
Okay. Yeah.
and then I had the GI Joe little guys that would also include Captain Power, the Kenner superpowers, and all of the ones that were like 3 to 4 inches. And then I had
Mm,
the GI Joe style, and I found the Hasbro's were just like their own entity. They were a little
mm,
too small for GI Joe or for the He-Mans, and too
mm,
big for the GI Joes. But when I saw the lineup, because I'll say this, even though I'm an LJN guy, Hasbro Series 1 has got to be the best Series 1 for any toy
sure.
line. They
Mm,
just put out so many guys, and my number five was one half of the very first two or Hasbro figures that I had gotten when they came out. And I was excited to see this guy because I had his partner in LJN, and now I had
ah,
Smash.
yes.
I
Yes.
thought this was a great likeness, great
So
play
close to
pose.
making my list. Even yeah, that is a
And I'm
great
just
figure.
glad to have him because
Yeah.
I was a Demolition fan, and I thought it was preposterous that they had Axe and they didn't have Smash, and they had another series after
Mm,
Axe was released where they could have had a make good
mm,
and had Smash, but they didn't. But Hasbro came through
okay.
in the clutch.
I'm with you. The Hasbro's, I completely, get what you're saying. This is one of the reasons why I've not been drawn back to them yet. I suppose now that I've decided I'm going to get a collection going again, is they are a bit cartoony. There were some in there which I think the likenesses are brilliant, and he is definitely one of them. I think they nailed that, and I loved the playability with him was great.
Yeah,
It's top notch. Yeah, good shout. Good shout. I don't know
yeah.
why they didn't do an LJN then. I didn't realize that. To be honest, I thought they
Yeah,
was.
yeah, they just had Axe. So they just had Axe, and
Weird.
then the next series they just had Warlord, and on the back they made it seem like if they continued on with the line, they were going to have Barbarian, Bushwhackers, Brother Love, Bad News, and Smash.
Okay. Be interesting. Bushwhackers would have been interesting, actually.
Yeah, they would have.
Is that cool? That's a strong start, mate. That's a strong start. I don't know if I'm going to top this one. Um, in no particular order, then I suppose I'll go with since I've mentioned the Galoob line and the fact that I am starting to collect them again. There's a reason for it, and I think they were the ones. Playability aside, because I think when you, like I was, you're collecting both. You got the Hasbro's and the Galoobs going. There is a big difference between them. Obviously the Galoob ones are static, no articulation, anything like that. Saying that, the likenesses on them, I think this is one of the most beautiful lines in terms of, the realism.
Yeah.
Um, I could have picked any of them if I'm honest with you, but there is one, and it's going to be quite a laughable one. So do bear with me, because it's quite a controversial choice. But I've gone with Elegante.
Okay.
Right. So again, I could have had, I think Lex Luger was one of my favorite ones as a kid because again the likeness was spot on, even though most people say that he's probably not as ripped as he should have been necessarily. And he had that weird kind of, he did have, you could do a lot with him in that pose. Yeah. Elegante was one that he had a bit of a story to it, where I was up at my aunt and uncle's, which is, the cousin that I said was massively influential on me. We went up to visit for like a week. He
Hmm.
had, this was 95, I think. he had said to me that he had seen a Diesel action figure somewhere. Now, I know that this was one I think that Hasbro were due to do, and I don't think, to my knowledge, they never released one, or at least not over here.
No, they didn't. It was kind of like that LJN that Ghost series, the one that
Yeah,
would have been. I think
yeah.
with Hasbro, the would have beens. I think they were gonna do Luger made in USA style because they only had the
Okay.
Narcissist.
Yeah,
I'm not
yeah.
100% sure on that, and I don't know who else they had planned. Maybe Jarrett.
They did, if I remember rightly. Yeah, I think I've heard him say that he was meant to have one. They had done like the even the prototype of it or whatever.
Yeah.
So my cousin was like, "Yeah, I've seen Diesel. He's in this shop in town." So he took me to town, and we went to this. We went to every toy store we could, and I couldn't find one. We went to the last place, which is real kind of like independent toy shop. It's those that I absolutely love, not the big
They're the
chains.
best ones.
They are, and they had WCW Galoobs in there, and there was Elegante was there, and he just stood out. The scale of the guy is great. If you look at his Giant Gonzalez figure, yes, he's taller than the other Hasbro's, but not very much. But you get the scale of Elegante in the Galoobs is just off the charts. And I hadn't seen him before. I knew of him, obviously. As a WCW fan, I knew of him. I didn't know there was a figure until I saw it, and I bought it with the the intention of going back to my aunt and uncle's. And by that point, my cousin still had his collection of his Hasbro's, and I got him and I compared him to Andre the Giant, and I was like, "My giant is bigger than yours," and I remember saying that, and it was just one of those moments where I was like, "I'm proud. I am the only person I know that had an Elegante figure."
I'm
And
jealous too because I didn't have any of the UK exclusive
oh, this is
Galoob.
it. Yeah, I took this for granted because I didn't realize until recent years how many of these were only available over here. Trying to get hold of them now is quite difficult with some of them, a couple in particular. But I think the look of the guy, again, take his wrestling ability aside, now, as a figure, he looked amazing. He had that kind of almost like Starship Trooper type um, gear on and everything. Again, yes, the pose was a little bit odd for him, I think. And I think what was even funnier is on the box for the WCW ring, one of the releases, they had him jumping off of the diving platform from the corner. It's like, at what point did he ever come off the top? But that's fine. It looks good. Um, yeah, so he's definitely one that I'm obviously going to be tracking down to complete my collection at some point. But yeah, he's a memorable one just really for that kind of holy grail moment. So yeah, he makes my list. So
Yeah,
cool. On to
my
yours.
number four is one that I didn't have as a child because it wasn't released at this point. And I got this because when I had seen these toys being released, I thought these are gorgeous.
Hmm.
Toyetic, great for display. This is from Powertown, USA, the Bruiser Brody.
They
If
they
there
are
ever was a
amazing.
wrestler that craved to be an action figure, it was Bruiser
Yeah,
Brody. It just has
yeah.
a one of one look, and I'm not going to open this. It's
Is
going to
that is
stay
that
in the
just
box.
a display piece? Yeah,
Yeah,
I've
just
I've s-
the figure's in there, of course, but it's just like I also have Stan Hansen, but I thought I already have Stan in the Remco line, but I didn't have any other
okay.
Brody, and I needed it.
That is beautiful. Now, I've got a sub list here. I was going to go over at some point if we had time. It was kind of like a wish list of figures that are on our list and we haven't got or have never had or whatever. And he and Stan Hansen, those Power Town figures, are on mine because I just think they're beautiful. That whole line is great. But
Yeah.
there's something about Brody and Hansen. I grew up with Stan Hansen. I didn't see a lot of him in action,
Hmm.
but he was just one of those brutal kind of guys. It came with a lot of myth and folklore, I think, over
Oh, he's
here.
my second favorite wrestler all time.
It's really, oh, there you go. There you go. I would have the quandary there if I had those as to whether to take them out or not because they're beautiful.
They're
But
beautiful. Like you'd
even the
almost want to get
packaging's good.
two.
Yeah, you do.
One to open up to just
Yeah,
to have it in your hand, and the other one just to,
yeah.
save
It's
it in case there's a rainy day and you need to sell it.
it's one thing I am quite jealous of now. I mean, the kids that are growing up probably won't um, respect it and value it enough. Is how realistic a lot of these figures are. The technology that comes with them nowadays is fantastic.
The face scanning and
Yeah,
whatnot.
we grew up with some real ropey um, versions of our heroes, but all of them look. And then you've got companies like this. I'm so glad it's not just WWE and AEW that are doing them. There's all these independent companies coming out with it,
But honestly, Chris, I feel like it's more for our generation
I
because
think so.
I think kids nowadays are more into their iPads and
Yeah,
video games. I don't know if
yeah.
they even care about toys. I don't have any kids. Like I remember my ex's friend's son came over and I got him an Elias figure and
Mm,
he loved it, but I don't know if that was just because it was a gift.
yeah,
I don't know if kids nowadays are as into them as their dads may be.
maybe not. And that might be why they are. These companies are spending the time and the effort creating what they are now. I mean, you look at a lot of these lines that are bringing out the like the reproductions of the old ones. You get ones that are doing Hasbro stars. You get ones that are
Yeah.
doing Galoob stars. And that, you're not telling me that they are for the kids these days who don't know
Yeah.
who these guys are.
Oh,
It's
you
just
see, you go to the store and the peg warmers will be a bunch of classy Freddy Blassies. Like, what kid is gonna want this
quite.
white hair old
Yeah,
man
right.
unless they're in the thick of things. They're in the
Yeah.
you know watching the weekly television, and guys like that are long dead. That's
Yeah,
for their grandparents, people
it
our
is.
age.
Absolutely. Yeah. But that's cool. I haven't been able to get my kids into wrestling. I think this is I've not really tried. I've almost wanted to keep it for myself because I don't want them to be subjected to the new stuff. I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole in this episode. This isn't for the time and place for this.
You know what
Um,
I'd recommend?
go on.
Hulk Hogan's Rock and Wrestling, the
Ah,
cartoon.
yes, I remember that. That was
That'll
honestly
get them
really good.
into it.
I will actually probably, and then that'll give me an excuse to play the old stuff because that's the only
Yeah,
place they
you
can
don't want to
really
watch the
do
new
these things.
stuff. You,
No,
you just show them the old stuff, and that will then it'll snowball, and
yeah,
before you know it, they'll want the the wrestling albums
yes, yes.
and the sticker
I
sets
look.
and so on and so forth.
Oh, dude, that's one thing that I look for to try and I regret not keeping mine. I got rid of my entire wrestling collection, which was probably worth about 5 grand. I estimated by the time that I got rid of it. I sold it for £220. Everything, videos, magazines, figures, everything I had, because I was going to uni and I decided wrestling wasn't cool anymore. And I sold it and I bought a guitar, and I've since sold that guitar. It doesn't. I've got nothing to tie to my wrestling history at all. So any excuse I've got to try, if I can use them to try and get more of that going, that'd be brilliant. Anyway,
I'm
next one on
curious, your number
my
four.
list. Next one on my list. So I I was actually a massive fan, again, controversial, I think, opinion. I was a massive fan of the Jakks bone crushing action line.
Okay.
Um, it came out probably at a time that I shouldn't have been still wanting to buy wrestling figures, I guess, because I was about 14 when they first came over here.
Mhm.
But I was still close, and I was still kind of having some fun, acting out certain things here and there. And I don't know what it was. This was the first time that they stepped away from the Hasbro's. There hadn't been any new lines for a couple of a few years, and all of a sudden they've gone to the 6-inch scale rather
Mhm.
than I think it was 3 3/4 inch or whatever the Hasbro's were.
What was it? Brett, Shawn, Goldust, Razor,
Undertaker.
Undertaker,
Can't remember anyone else there. I was surprised
Mankind.
Goldust was in there on the first wave. Considering that it got Razor, Diesel, Shawn Michaels, Bret Hart, Undertaker. Yeah, I thought Goldust is a bit of an odd one. My first two figures from there were Shawn Michaels and the Undertaker. It's the only two that one store we've got over here, catalog store called Argos. It's the only two that they stocked. And my mum, they didn't used to give you a choice either as to what you got. You just went in there and you ordered one, and you got one of the two. You couldn't actually ask for a specific one. So the first time she went and bought me one, I think I got two Undertakers. And I was a massive Shawn Michaels fan. So she went back to try again until she got a Shawn. And then I just ended up with a few of them. Anyway, the one I'm going to pick out of that, though, is it's not from the first wave. It's one that actually came a little later on. They released it twice. So in the Superstar Series 3 line, and also the Signature Series 1, it's Mankind. Sadly, I haven't got hardly any of these to show, but it is it's the first Mankind figure that you could get. It was the classic, you know,
Bird outfit.
brown get yeah, basically if you want to call it that, yes. And at the time, um, I was it was he was one of those characters that really kind of mesmerized me. I knew him as Cactus Jack and everything, but this went a step further. His sadistic side really I felt was quite darker as
It was the
Mankind.
first time Undertaker was ever interesting to me.
And
Was
that
when
yeah, oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think as a fan, you see someone who actually was given a win and just really dominated him in the way that he did. So to have a figure of his, and I felt it was quite lifelike. Take the face away, because I think they really there wasn't much detail paid for the face and the eyes and the mouth and that, but the attire was spot on, and I really loved that figure. And I only had a bit like you had when you first got the Hasbro's. It didn't really fit with all my figure collection. My fig fed at the time was all Galoob and Hasbro size figures. I had things like Batman, Power Rangers, and that were all in there, all the same size. And then the Jakks ones come along, and I kind of like I can't
a little
have
bit
the
bigger.
Undertaker, which is double the size of. So it's not going to happen. It didn't really fit. But then when I got Mankind and Stone Cold Steve Austin as well, all of a sudden I had the makings then I could actually use them. But yeah, no, love that figure. Like I say, take the face away. If you base it on just neck down, it's a really cool likeness. Great figure.
Yeah, see, for me, I'm always going on Facebook Marketplace looking
Yeah.
for figures, and it's so tough because I try to only get I'll get ones if they're cheap or
Hmm.
if I'm a fan of the wrestler.
Okay.
The problem is I'm not a fan of a lot of the more modern WWE
No.
wrestlers,
Same.
and the ones that I keep seeing are guys and gals that I'm not a fan of. And I have my TikTok videos like, is it worth it
Yes.
to get somebody that I don't like just for a minute long video where I give it
Quite.
a 3.2 out of 10? I don't know.
I'm totally with you there, and I've looked on Marketplace only recently, and before I found a guy who hooked me up with quite a few of the Galoobs to start me off. There was someone very local that had two of them. One of them I never had, which was Z-Man. And all of a sudden I see him everywhere. Every time I go looking on these sites, Facebook Marketplace, Vinted, eBay, he's everywhere. So I really realized he was actually quite a common one, but I never had him. I never saw him myself. But it's
He was the
great.
last of the Galoobs that I had gotten myself when I was
Oh, is
collecting as a
he?
kid. Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't see him in any of the stores, and then me and my mom went to Maine in the States, and I saw him and the Honky Tonk Man Hasbro, and I got two of them,
Mm.
and I remember that like it was yesterday. Couldn't tell
Yeah.
you anything that happened 3 years ago, but I
No.
can tell you stuff like that.
And this is what I was going to say. This is what's great delving into this, because all of these I could say where but the experience that I've got that associates with them, and I can remember more of my life around wrestling, in particular wrestling figure collecting, when I was a kid than I can anything
Wait,
else
you
that I've done
think about
since.
some of the stuff that you learned in school. It's
Yeah,
a
good.
complete blank. Stuff
It
that
is.
would have been helpful. Instead,
Yeah,
I have all this information in my brain for instances like this when I get to talk about wrestling with a fellow
this is
wrestling
it.
fan,
Yeah.
and then the rest of my life is just waiting for an opportunity like this to talk about something I care
And
about
they
again.
and they go, that's probably why it was such a worthwhile kind of experience to go through as a kid. Forget all the stuff that everyone knows. You hang on to these ones. So go on then, who's your next one?
My number three is a figure that I remember seeing in the magazines, but they never had them in my hometown, and that was from the AWA Galoob line, or no, Remco. And I've always been partial to this member of the tag team, and it is Road
Ah,
Warrior Animal.
awesome.
And I remember seeing them in the magazines and thinking, I need these guys. These are the same size as my He-Man figures. I could have
Mm,
had so many matches, but I didn't get them until like 5 years ago when I started
yeah,
buying them off eBay. And yeah, I love. I also have Hawk and the manager Paul Ellering,
that's cool.
and
I do
I just
like
find animals very toyetic.
he is. I remember when he was always my favorite of the two, because I always found with the Legion of Doom, if one of them was always going to be in trouble and take a lot of the beating, it was going to be Hawk, and then Animal would come in with the hot tag and he would he'd finish him off. When I got the Hasbro's of Legion of Doom, they were really horrible figures in themselves because of the spikes. You couldn't really do a lot with them.
Yes.
They couldn't take any pins. Hawk was a jumper, so I hated that. but Animal was a really cool. You know, he had the gorilla press slam action like some of the others
Yeah,
did, but I found him really cool. Really cool lightings, really cool figure to use. I like the AWA line. That is one I've never seen. Again, I don't
yeah.
think I've had a look and I can't find any listings over here for them to suggest that actually they were over here at all.
Yeah, I recommend just going on eBay and getting them that way because
Mm.
they're just great to hold. Like I could picture 6-year-old Andrew being a huge fan of these. I remember they even had like bootleg versions of these where they had like a Hulk Hogan that had blue trunks and
See, I may have seen those because you see the style of that. They're very similar to the Masters of the Universe, aren't they?
Mhm.
Kind of thing. I remember having a couple of wrestlers that were that make, but they were bootleg ones. And one of them even I think had a tattoo of an eagle on his chest or something like
Yeah,
that.
yeah, I could see that.
And I was it, I they were I loved pick up anything that I could use in my fig fed when I was a kid. Didn't matter where it came from. So these were actually they were pitched as wrestlers, so they were ideal. That's why I really love the look of the Remco line because it brings those memories back of having whatever it was that those guys were.
Oh, yeah,
Um,
whenever you get a new guy, that's when they get the push. You know,
that
you're
is it,
never gonna play
absolutely.
with them as much as when they're new. And then as soon as you get somebody new, it's like, okay,
That is
this
it.
guy's back to the mid card you go.
That's it. That's it. Oh, brilliant. Right, my number three. Again, I'm going out of sync here, so I've got to think who I've. Oh, right, okay. So I'm going to stick with the the Jakks bone crushing action line, BCA line.
Okay.
Again, I think this was because I was a bit more aware and I had a bit more choice of my own to buy what I was when the Jakks ones were out. I've got more of an attachment to them than I actually realized until I started going through here, going through for this list. So there was mine is Double J Jeff Jarrett.
Okay.
Okay, and it's from the Jack Pacific. It's the Superstars Series 7 line.
What's the color palette on that one?
So that, if I remember rightly, it was a mix of purple, black, maybe dark pink, and that it was a
Yeah, because he
classic.
had crazy gear at that
He did,
time. I
he did, and
hated it.
we touched on the Hasbro potentially having a double J that never happened. Now, he was one wrestler. I wasn't a massive fan of his ring work, but I loved the look, and he was one I desperately wanted in my figure federation at some point. And I could never find anyone who even emulated him that I could use as
You
one.
know the story behind his like strappy
Is it
gear?
is it because it's meant to be like guitar strings or something? Is that
Yes.
right?
And I didn't
Yeah,
realize that until a
I
few
didn't
years
at
back. I
all.
was like,
It
that's a
kind of makes
stretch.
sense, but it kind of like it's still bad. Um, but I think again, this was a figure that I didn't realize was out until I saw it in the store, and it even came with the glasses. You know, his light up glasses that he used to have. It's like really multicolored, really brightly colored specs that you
Yeah.
put in there. The little hole in the side of his head, so they slotted in. They broke very easily because they were tiny. But
Oh
I
yeah,
had
any of the accessories any of the toys came
yeah,
with were just
they don't
lost
survive.
pretty much instantly.
They don't survive. But it was just look of him, really. I'd always wanted Jeff Jarrett. Now, I was going to include another one on this list, which I'm now dumping because I've got one who's going to be my number one now. So there we
Okay.
go. I told you I was doing this on the fly. And they came at roughly the same time. And it's because they were guys that I loved back in the day, but never had a representation of. And the other one was X-Pac. But it was the first one that he had from the BCA line WrestleMania Series 7, apparently. It was released in 1998. The first X-Pac gear, the red, black, silver,
Hmm.
jolly. Um,
That's what I was picturing in my head when you were saying.
yeah, I'd never had a 1, 2, 3 kid figure. I had two or three of my own versions of him.
Oh, that Hasbro 1, 2, 3 kit. I never had it, but
No,
it
so
looks like garbage.
it does. Again, it was
It's
one
like
of
the
those.
Flair one, just too
Yeah,
skinny.
the only one that worked with that was Rick Rude because naturally it gave him the Rude
Yeah,
Awakening.
yeah,
The punch
that's true.
action was annoying. Um, Less said about the Ric Flair Hasbro, the better. I mean, what was going on with the face? It just doesn't look anything like him. That he is the epitome of the cartoony stigma. I think that it comes with the
Well,
Hasbro's.
that whole WF run, it was like Vince couldn't understand what made Flair Flair. Like Flair wore
No,
suits. He didn't wear his robe unless he
yeah,
was on his way to the ring. Instead, that whole WF run, he
that's
had
all he
his
did.
robe
Mm,
everywhere,
yeah, that is true. I didn't
or the
twig that.
sweaters.
I didn't twig that time because I was never really exposed much to classic Ric Flair. I had some WCW videotapes and that, but obviously you see him in the ring gear more than
Mhm.
anything. So his WWF version really wasn't that far from what I already knew him for. Yeah, going back and looking at the old, what he was doing when he wasn't wrestling, he was like giving his classic promos and that. He just come in
Well,
off,
that seemed more realistic.
It did, yeah, yeah. He's not going to walk around like that all the time, is he? Especially if he's not wrestling, why would you walk around in your underwear and a robe?
Like,
You
I
know?
mean, to be honest, the Hulk Hogan and the WF line is what got me into wrestling. But it's like
Mm,
when I was a kid, the first thing I dropped was Sesame Street because I always felt it was for babies. It
yeah,
talked down to me. Like I
yeah,
enjoyed some of the segments, but I found a lot of it was more for kids, and that's how I felt with the WWF. It was like
yeah,
it's your gateway, but eventually you're gonna want something that's not constantly talking down to you and thinking that you're stupid by having to,
yeah.
beat you over the head with the sledgehammer of plot.
That's a good point. So going back to it, Double J Jeff Jarrett, there you go. Just simply because he was one of those figures I always wanted. It is a great look. If you're not familiar with anyone who's listening to this, go and have a look. Um, and it was the first Double J figure I think there ever was that I knew of. I had a later one of his then when he changed his look, when he went to the short hair and the shorts, the silver shorts.
Don't tick me off.
That's it,
Or-
yeah. That era. I don't know. I wasn't a fan of that Jeff Jarrett era. I was much, much more of a fan of his we talk about cartoony, that look was it was great though. And I suppose it was a bit like Ric Flair. Like he was flamboyant, but he could change it every time. He had so many different outfits that he had, and
And I
that
always
just
love that. Like
appeals.
I liked when Hogan wore the white trunks or the blue trunks. When he
Mm,
just it was exclusive yellow, it wasn't as interesting to me. Like
no, that's true.
someone like Austin, like he gets a new figure seems like every second line. It's like how many times are you gonna
Same.
have black trunks?
I could quite. He is probably the most basic look you can have, and they just seem to be reproducing it left, right, and center. Just don't
Yeah.
get it.
That's why they always have like, oh, here's him in a different one of his t-shirts.
That's it. Yeah, and that's what my first Steve Austin figure was. One the classic he had. He had the blue jeans, and it was the classic Austin 316 top with the smoking skull on the back. And I think
Mhm.
again, face sculpt aside, that was a great likeness of him. They seem to concentrate more on the body and the stuff, the attire, rather than they did the actual faces back then. That's what I found. But going back to Jeff Jarrett, great. It is great that he looked like him. He was fantastic, and he
Uh,
went
it's, a, it's
he went
oh, go ahead.
straight into my federation. I think he went in and he he cost Brian Pillman a title match or something. I can't remember, but he was straight in there for me.
And
That's
and that's a good segue into my number two,
okay.
because you mentioned you didn't know that Jarrett was available until you saw him in the store.
Mm,
With my number two, my grandfather had gotten me the steel cage set, and for me, with my during my action figure collecting days, I didn't care about the big bells and whistles,
mm,
the big play sets, the vehicles. I just wanted the figures, the
yeah,
play men as I used to
yeah,
call it. And I was like, oh, thanks for the steel cage, but you could tell that I was like, I would have rather had, a
some other
toy, an action
plastic.
figure.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's like I think you could tell that because he was like he left and came back with a set that I didn't know was out, and it went from thanks for the steel cage set to oh my god, I'm so excited because the Heart Foundation.
Oh yes.
And I love Jim too, but the Brett, and you look at whether it be Jakks, Mattel, original San Francisco toy makers, all of the other Bretts, they never
They
managed to.
cannot. They
They
cannot do his likeness.
his hair and face is always a little off.
Yeah,
And with this, it's
spot on.
1986 Brett,
It
but
really is. Yeah,
they nailed it.
that's
And
great.
great play pose. This is my favorite LJN. It was between this and Savage, and I just because I remember getting it and not knowing that it was even a thing,
Mm,
made it just put it over the edge.
yeah. I love those moments, and I would have been the same if I'd got that Bret Hart figure, being a massive Bret Hart fan as well when I was younger. And I it was an argument I was having with myself the other day when I was kind of going through looking at it, figures and whatever. They cannot get Bret Hart right at all. They get everyone else. All this technology. What is it about him why has he always got a massive forehead?
Yeah,
The
or
single
the
hairline.
hair is like stringy over his
Yeah,
face, and it's just
they
off.
just
It's always
cannot
off.
ever do it. And I don't think there's there's very very few Bret Hart figures that I would say are any good. And I would say none of the new ones are. They don't do anything for me. The attire, again, if you go that, yeah, fine, they get in that right. The looks, the King of the Ring, the '93 King of the Ring special that they brought out, I think a couple of years ago of him, I would be all over that because I loved that event. But it's a shit likeness.
Yeah.
Again, apart from everything else that comes with it, it's just not, it's just no good.
And they do have a cheat because with Brett, you can put the shades on him,
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
and they still find
They can't
ways
do it.
to just make it look like anybody but Brett. Like it looks more like Tommy Wiseau.
Yeah. Who's that?
Have you never seen the movie? Oh, what's it called? My ex is gonna hate me for this. It's like one of those so bad it's good.
Okay.
Here, Google Tommy Wiseau. Wisseau. I can't remember the name of that movie.
Hang on. Is it W-I?
Sseau.
Tell me what's that. I can see why you pulled him up now. Yeah, fine. The Room.
The Room. That's it.
Is that the one?
It's
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
it's
I totally
very
get it.
bad.
Totally get it. Yeah, absolutely. Does look more. He does look more the Bret Hart figure than Bret Hart does.
Yeah,
It's yeah. Great choice, by the way. And,
yeah.
and I'm not just saying this. That was a perfect segue into my number two, which is the only Hasbro which has made my list. I will say, considering this was what I, grew up with. Um, it's got to be the Bret Hart Hasbro. When I think of that line, I was new. I had to have one on there. There were so many I did love. There's so many I hated. Again, jumpers. I'm not going to go into any
Yeah.
of those. I thought if you're going to ruin a guy's figure career, make him a jumper.
Yeah.
Ricky Steamboat. Yeah, I had him. I absolutely loved that dragon image. I know a lot of people hate it, but why make him? Why give him that kind of figure? And
Yeah.
the Randy Savage one with the
Oh,
tassels and the hat.
yeah.
Yeah, my mum, she got me that as a treat. I came back from school once. I don't know if I was ill or something. I'm not sure. And she to cheer me up, she gave me this, and it was so excited because it was the current version of Randy Savage, but it was horrific. Um, it was like one of those entrance things. I didn't have another Randy Savage to kind of say, well, this is his entrance, and then he's in the ring in his. I didn't have either of the others.
Now, did you have the Hasbro ring?
I did eventually. Yeah, I started off with the WCW one, and then
Okay.
I loved it when I got the WWF one because my WCW one at least the post bent really easily, and then all the they just kept popping out. So the Hasbro ring stayed as it was meant to be. But
The
yes,
Hasbro ring was the only one I had as a kid. The what was it Flingham the LJN version. I
hmm.
never had. My grandfather made me one out of wood, and like
Okay,
he used like broomsticks for the turnbuckle
hmm.
or for the posts, and it
Yeah,
was very durable. From what I've heard, the actual ring, if you
okay,
did much work on it, it would eventually break. But mine stayed with me throughout my youth.
that's cool. It's the Bret Hart was one of my heroes when I was growing up. I think you could do anything with that figure. He had a great play pose, great action. My action actually one of the few ones with that kind of spring action that actually lasted. Um, the only thing was the heart rubbed off on mine. I think I did that
Oh.
possibly. I might have
Now,
made
did you have
scratched
the
it off.
purple or the pink heart?
I had the pink one.
Okay.
Yeah. Was that the more common one? I think the purple one is the
I'm not
rarer
sure. I
one.
never had that. See, for me
No.
in the Hasbro line, I remember you talked about when you were 14, and I think 14 is right on the cusp. I think that's the last year a lot of kids go trick or treating,
Yeah, yeah.
and it's also when they stop collecting toys. For me, I was a
Absolutely.
little bit earlier. It was 12. I felt that I wanted to transition to sports card collecting,
Okay. Yeah.
as opposed to the toys, which I felt were like the Sesame Street thing. It was more for babies. And my last two were Earthquake and Typhoon from the Hasbro line, and
Ah,
then I
yes.
didn't get any more until I was, I think, 27 when I moved out here to Vancouver. I saw the Jakks Plastic Superstars line, and
Ah, yes. Yeah.
like finally got my attention. These are from my youth, and they
Yes.
great display cases. And I was like, I'm gonna get this for my brother, and then I wound up keeping them for myself.
I did love that line. When they started bringing that out, I was at uni when they started bringing those out, and I couldn't justify to myself because I was really kind of hiding away from my wrestling fascination then because I was like, I've grown out of this. Why am I still being drawn to it? No. When Jakks brought out the classic superstars, I was like, okay, I know why I'm drawn to these because these are the guys that I either had or these are the guys that I wanted to have that they never had figure
Hmm.
representation till now. And they were great. Junkyard Dog was one of the few ones I think I got from that line. Maybe Jimmy Snooker as well.
Yeah,
Um,
great for display. Like I have
mm,
quite a few of them, and I was tempted to put one of them on my list, but I didn't want one wrestler to be on my top five twice, and the one that I would have had would have been my number one overall.
okay.
Uh, would have been the same guy as my number one overall. I didn't want him on there twice. I kind of feel weird having Smash an Animal. It makes it look like I'm a face paint guy, but I wanted a good representation of my fandom and one from each line.
See, I was gonna, yeah, I was thinking with my top five, is there a way if I branch out of ones I had, are there any others from any other lines that I wanted? Could I get like one from different lines? And I'm not very familiar with a lot of them, the other ones, to be honest. I think there was so many out there, even back when I was collecting, early 2000s and that maybe, there was I love the Japan figures like New Japan
Oh
and that. I
yes,
had they were really small, but I had a
the poppy
Vader and
ones.
I don't know what they were, to be honest. Is that what they were? Was that the star they were known as, or
It's like the brand.
oh, yeah, I don't know.
Believe
Um,
they're like vinyl.
they were like, oh, they were
And
like
they
they were
kind of like
cross
have their
between.
arms down like to their side.
No, no, I know the ones that no, they weren't quite like they were like they were a perfect combination of the Hasbro and the Galoob because
Okay.
they had the likeness of the Galoob, but they had some articulation. They not like everything, but the arms did move freely and they had good poses. I had Vader and I had Two Cold Scorpio that were a tag team, I think, at the time, and I
Oh
had
yeah,
them
for
as a
Noah.
couple pack, and they were great. But no, I couldn't. I really did fly this. I had to go with what I knew, sadly, which is why I think there's a lot of great ones that are probably missed off. I'm intrigued now. Who's your number one then?
My number one, I went with the guy that I found had, out of all of the figures, my favorite play pose. Because when it gets right down to it, I use these wrestlers to wrestle. They
Yeah.
like when I wasn't watching wrestling, I was either reading about it or I was, wrestling my grandmother's pillow in
Yeah.
the bed when I was
Yeah.
small enough to not like break the bed, and then also like had my fake fed,
Mm.
and I'm going with from the WCW Galoob line, Barry Windham.
Ah, good choice.
I
Yeah.
just loved this figure. The play pose was great.
Yes.
Having Wyndham as a figure because he just missed the LJN line. He could have been on there because he was tag champ when they believe were released. He just,
Okay.
he left the promotion.
Yeah.
And when I saw that the Galoob line was being a thing, because when you're a kid, people just think wrestling is WWF. That
Yes.
everything else is either amateur or the minor leagues
Yeah.
or WF wannabes, and like
Mm.
I never felt that way. I always thought that they were competitors, just
Mm.
another version of pro wrestling, and I like the more adult presentation.
Mm.
And this Barry Windham was the this is the Four Horsemen Barry Windham right
It
here,
is.
and
Yeah.
great
That
figure.
is a great, it very, very nearly made my list when I was thinking of the Galoobs because again, yes, you touched on the play pose was fantastic. You could do so much with that. At the bull, he did fantastic for a bulldog,
Yeah,
and
bulldog
the lariat or
lariats.
anything, absolutely. And I think going back to, if I was to reel off my wish list, another one on there was Dustin Rhodes of the Galoobs. Never saw him. Never. He was. This was a really mythical figure when I was growing up. I had
Mhm.
I had heard there may be one. I'd never saw it. He's the only one in like entrance gear, which I think is still fantastic. For can be used as him because the bulldog again, that kind of thing, and him and
Yeah.
Barry Windham together would have been great. My cousin had Barry Windham, I didn't have him when I was a kid. I borrowed his for an extended amount of time and then had to give him
Now, is
back.
that the UK version with the blue trunks, or
No,
did he
this was a
have?
black one. So
Okay,
yeah, again, never knew until very recently that there was a variation
yeah.
of the UK ones in the blue. Didn't look as good in the blue. I will say that. I think heel Barry Windham. I always just think black because I think of what when I knew of Barry Windham, I knew of him in WCW, but I also knew he was in WWF as the Widowmaker.
Yeah.
Which that version, that Galoob, is very reminiscent of the look he had in the WWF with the ponytail and all
Mhm.
that. So I wanted him and I used him as the Widowmaker. I didn't use him as Barry Windham. I used him as the Widowmaker. And yeah, he's a great. Oh, that is a quality call on that one. I'm
I'm
glad you
curious
agreed.
what your number one's gonna be. Can I take
Ah,
a guess?
you can do. I don't know if you'll get it.
What line is it from?
So let's
Is that,
say
or is
it's
that gonna be a giveaway?
let's say it's Galoob.
Okay. Is it Sting?
It's not.
Okay.
No, it should be. He was my first Galoob. I think him and Luger, obviously, like any kid back then, you got Sting and Luger. If you're going to start with these ones, you got Sting and Luger.
I started with Flair and Scott Steiner myself.
Oh, did you? Okay, okay. So this one's been staring me in the face, and I completely forgot because this is the latest. This is one of the latest additions to my line. PN
Oh
News.
wow!
Okay, so kind
I'm
of
jealous.
this is a guy that again, he was one of those figures. You touched on it. There was a ghost series of Galoobs back in the day. PN News, Ricky Morton, Diamond Stud. I think there were new issues of the Freebirds, which
Yeah.
horrible, horrible molds because they were in their entrance gear, and I don't think you would have been able to do anything with them. Um, Possibly another Z-Man. I'm not sure if he was meant to be another one to
I
run. Oh
think
no,
Black
Ric
Blood.
Flair. Ric Flair. It was so.
I thought it was Black Blood, the Billy Jack
There
Haynes
was what?
character.
Yes. Now I've seen that recently because they've obviously there's shout out by the way to Top Rope Collectibles who are doing the who made these. They're doing the Diamond Stud as well, which is out for pre-order. They haven't paid me for promotion. I just think it's fantastic that these guys are actually producing these. Now PN News I knew about in the day. I always wanted him because his look. I knew of him in the magazines. Never saw him on any of the VHS that I had because they always cut his matches
Yeah.
from the at least over here. But I saw him in the sticker albums I had, the magazines and everything, and I always wanted one. And then when I heard that there was one, I was like, where do I get one? It never made. And then Top Rope Collectibles went and made all the dreams come true. So this has got to be my number one because I'm so glad I've actually got one. Now I interviewed PN News a few years ago for the show, and I brought this up with him because at the time this wasn't in production. And I asked him about this mythical Galoob figure he was meant to have had, and he told me about it.
Did
And
did he have a prototype?
no, he had been offered. He said there were only like so many. I think there were only like five or something that people managed to actually get in circulation. He was offered one for about £500. I don't think he went for it. At that point, I don't think he had one, but obviously he will have now. They've actually released this in three different variations as well. So there's one with like a black, maybe a pink as well. I can't remember off the top of my head. But this to me was the classic look
Yeah.
of PN News. And he stands forefront of my collection at the minute because, it's one of those. That was the reason why I decided I needed the Galoob line because I'm like, I need to have PN News
I love
and I
that
need
both
one.
of our number ones are Galoobs.
It's brilliant, isn't it?
You don't need the articulation
You
because if
don't.
you're a kid, you have imagination. You can make the you can if you can't work a match,
Yeah.
then you know you you're just brain rotted. You
Yeah.
you don't have that imagination because I mean when you're brought up with LJNs, you make do. You do what you
Yeah.
can.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think having the nice mix like I had of the Hasbros and the Galoobs, there was just something. Sometimes some of them went well together. You could play with them together. Some of them they just wouldn't. You needed either Hasbros to go against each other or Galoob. Looking at them now, Arn Anderson was a great one.
Yep.
The pose on him was fantastic for like what he did, the
Great
DDT,
for
the
the
spine
spine bust
buster.
for the yeah
Absolutely, yeah. And
doorbuster.
I don't know, some of the Hasbros you just didn't get. It didn't look like they took many of them seriously, if I say that. But the Galoob line, they really did. I've heard that the reason they're not articulated is because they needed to rush the line out that quickly. They didn't have time. I would say probably better for it, because they definitely do stand up these days,
Yeah.
to
And
everything doing that.
they also had other, like, dating back to LJNs. The LJNs, these were originally supposed to be the prototypes, and they were going to have the smaller versions, but when they
That's right.
when they saw
Yeah.
these, they loved them. Yeah, so you also had the Bash and Brawlers, I think they were called, or the kind of their play on the WF Tonka wrestling buddies,
Yes. Okay. Yeah. 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 I
and
think.
even the big ones like the 14-inch Sting, Luger, Sid, and
Yeah.
Flair.
They were monstrosities. I remember I had a
Yes.
Sting. And again, I was watching Major Fig podcast recently when they did the whole Galoob line and they touched on those. And he's right, Matt Cardona said they are a weapon.
Yeah,
Those things, they are so heavy. And yeah, I remember that. Yeah, I didn't know what to do with it. I only had one. I was
that's
like,
all
I
you need. They're
can't.
just for display.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I used to try and wrestle him myself. Like that didn't work. Too
Yeah.
much of a size difference. And his head came off as well, quite easily, which is odd. But yeah, no, great display pieces now. If you can track any down, in decent enough condition.
Yeah,
I
it's
think,
kind of like when you were a DVD collector and they try to get cute and have a different type of case. It's like, this doesn't fit my display
yeah,
now.
that's it. What am I supposed to do
Everything's
now?
got to be
Thanks for
scale.
that. Yeah. Books do that as well. I hate that when you've got a collection of paperbacks and then the new one comes out and
A
it's
little
a
bit
hardback. You've
longer.
then got to wait for the paperback to come out. Well, anyway, there we go. We've had a great. I love the fact that we've both finished. I thought you were going to go. I thought it'd be LJN for you. I must admit. Um,
Look, I love the Brett, and I was tempted, but I just remember as a kid when I got this Barry Windham, and if somebody, it never happened, but if somebody would have put a gun to my head and said, Andrew, what's your favorite wrestling toy? I would have said the Barry Windham from Galoob.
that's
I
awesome.
think because I was always more of a WCW guy, and out of all the Galoobs, I just found this is my favorite play pose.
Yeah, that's good. And that is so. There are some right howlers in that line. Don't get me wrong. Um, as display pieces now, fantastic. I'm not going to argue against it. Again, Ron Simmons. I had great runs with Ron Simmons in my Fig Fed. He was still able to do a lot. Um, but what do you do with that one? I think he's possibly one of the worst ones. I'm trying to think who else in the line maybe had a
Easily
worse
the worst
play
one, I
post.
think.
I think so. Yeah, because at least
Like
even the
Pillman's with those hands like this, I'm not a big fan of, but
no, but it did match. You could okay. He looked like he was flying. I
yeah,
suppose you
yeah.
could do that in
And he
ring
did do the
fitting.
overhand chop as opposed to the
Yeah, that's true. And again, a good neck breaker.
yeah.
I always found on that one. Elegante's pose was questionable. Sid's, I didn't realize. I think Sid's came from a reference photo anyway because he used to do that kind of pose in the ring, didn't he?
Yeah.
But
But
it's like,
the thing with Sid was it made him look bigger. Like
yeah,
that Sid Galoob seems to be a little bit taller than even Wyndham, who's also a big guy.
mm, yeah. I'm looking at him now. Actually, there is yeah, tiny, tiny bit different. Probably not as big stature wise as maybe he's in proportion. He was never really a huge guy for his size in theory, was he? To be honest, considering how tall he was.
Well, he was one half of the skyscrapers.
He was. See, there you go then. Okay, let's send this out. Just well, we've got a few more minutes to add on the end.
Mhm. Wish
Who?
list?
Yeah, wish list. Firstly, if we carry on with the Galoob line for the moment, are there any you feel you would have liked to have seen in that line that weren't? I've been asked this question because Top Rope Collectibles again, obviously, are now making our dreams come true, and it got me thinking the other day. Is who would you have liked to have seen?
I would have loved to have seen a Great Muta.
Ah, now you're talking.
That a Great
Yes.
Muta, he just missed the cutoff. Like he was gone in early '90, but I
Mm,
feel like they could have stretched that and had a Muta figure because if anybody was just screaming
agreed.
to be made into a toy, it's
Yeah,
Great Muta. I'd say him,
definitely.
and if we go in the other direction and just a little bit later, a
Mm,
stunning Steve Austin would have been neat.
yeah, yeah. That was one that I was talking to someone the other day, and that was one that he came up with. That especially when you got people like Dustin Rhodes, Ron Simmons, he's that kind of level. I mean, Stunning Steve was there, and he was one of the best. My pick would have been two. I think the Midnight Express
Yeah,
would have been
good,
great in the
good
tag
call.
team line. When you look at you had the Steiners, Doom, Freebirds, um, they
Pillman
had
and
to be
Zink.
there. Pillman and Zenk, yeah, exactly. You
Yeah,
forgot about that. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, Midnight Express would have been awesome. But
yeah.
there you go. Hopefully, we might even get a Ricky Morton if they're going on this, which they seem to be kind of possibly going along this line that never existed. Hopefully, the Ricky Morton will happen.
And I can
Um,
say this for the LJN line. I remember as a kid, the thing that I used to love so much was Christmas.
mm,
And I think I started getting excited for Christmas as soon as November hit. As soon as Halloween was over,
absolutely, I
then
still
Christmas
do.
was the next thing. And I used to
Yeah,
always wish for a Dino Bravo action figure.
good call. Actually, yeah. Have you seen the one that they have brought out
Yeah, but the thing with
previously?
I want a Dino with the green trunks, or the black trunks, or even
Okay.
the freaking Canadian flag ones. The fact that it's always the later version of Dino with
Yeah,
the fleur de lis when he was
yeah.
Earthquake's sidekick. I want just like a 1988 version of Dino
Okay.
Bravo.
And see, that was a lesser for me. The Dino Bravo I was familiar with is the one they brought out. So if ever I was wanting one for my collection, it would be that. Um, I started off my first ever event that I ever watched, that I ever got a video for, was Survivor Series 88. And yeah, I think he was in black trunks in that there. I always found that to be a bit odd because I'd already seen him in the like the fleur de lis stage.
Yeah,
That was what I knew, and the blonde hair. And that, he had blonde hair then, didn't he?
yeah, blonde hair.
Yeah, yeah.
He debuted the blonde hair at Mania 3. Before then, he had the Canada jacket, Canada trunks, but he had the black
Yes.
hair.
Yeah. Saw a very, very old, or quite an old match of his later on down the line, which really threw me out when he had dark hair. I was like, no. When he was teaming with Gino Brito.
Gino Brito, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
If you want to take a look at the best Dino Bravo match, in my opinion, look for from 1985. It's Dino Bravo and Rick Martel against the Road Warriors. It's the Road
Oh.
Warriors in Montreal, which I find is the best version of the Road Warriors because they didn't gobble up their opponents; they sold.
Yeah, I'll have to hunt that one out. I didn't realize that match even took place, actually, to be honest. Sounds like
Yeah,
a great
I'll
match.
send it to you on Messenger.
Yeah, do. Yeah, definitely want to see that. So let's finish off then. Yeah, let's do a wish list then. Obviously, figures that do exist. Otherwise, we could be here all night if we
Mhm.
sort of go off our fantasy wish list. Figures out there that do exist that you either want now or wanted as a kid and never did, and the ones that eluded you.
The Sergeant Slaughter that was the mail away from Hasbro that was at LJN scale. I've never had it in my hand. I've heard that it's like the original San Francisco Toy Makers WCW versions
Okay,
of.
yeah. What attire is he in?
Um, I think he
Is that the
has.
one with the white?
No,
No.
it's he's got the green tank top with the black tights. He's
So
kind of
it's
like
that sort of 90s look that he had. Um,
more 80s. If
okay.
you look up Sergeant Slaughter Hasbro mail away, or Sergeant Slaughter LJN, there's different
I think, yeah, now you say it. If
because
it's
it's
OGN stuff, I think I have seen it.
because the
Yeah.
LJNs are flexible. You can, but this, from what I've heard, it's more of a hard plastic.
Yes, I
Um,
can see that now. Yeah, he is. He's in the green. I thought it was the white kind of singlet. It's not. Yeah, it's green with USA on it.
yeah,
Is that the
that's
one?
one that I've never held in my hands. That one and also Warlord. There's other ones that I didn't have, but like a friend had, so I've
Yeah.
actually played with. Whereas those ones I don't know how they feel.
That's a good one actually. Looking at the price, I can kind of see. Yeah, it's one of
Yeah, that's
those.
why it's
Yeah.
on the wish list for a while.
So I mean, wish I've already mentioned a couple off mine. So Dustin Rhodes, Galoob, definitely. I mean, if I'm going to complete this collection, I've got to try and track one down at some point and be willing to part with a little bit more money. I have got a. I've set myself it's made this quite fun project. I've set myself a maximum that I would spend on any one figure, and it comes nowhere near what Dustin Rhodes or Big Josh would
Yeah,
cost.
I'm curious. What's your cutoff?
So my cutoff for £40 a figure. I said so I can
What's the
achieve.
conversion? Let look that up. See what the Canadian equivalent. Because the reason I asked is I spent $60 on this. This I
Okay.
think the most I've spent.
See,
No,
I
actually, I think I spent 100 on Brett.
see. I can justify these things. Whether I can convince other people, whatever it is another matter. Um,
Your better half.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's be the one, the bank manager. If I'm going to complete this line, I at some point I either need to just accept it's not going to be complete because I don't think I'm ever going to lay my hands on a big Josh ever at a decent price in a decent condition that warrants that price. Um, for
So
which
75 Canadian dollars. So
okay, yeah. So yeah, I don't know those Power Town ones. By the way, I looked at those just before we came on, and they're actually over. And there must be a retailer over here that does stock them for £30, which actually is quite for me quite reasonable. That's
it
within my,
is.
I
They're
could
gorgeous
justify.
figures.
Yeah, I could justify 1 month if I can't get any Galoobs. Just I could treat myself to one of those. But on the so yeah, obviously Brody and Hanson I've already mentioned were on my wish list. And another one which I didn't realize till just recently it only existed. I think it only existed anyway in a triple pack. It is a more recent release. It's from the Mattel Elite line, but it's a Raw 30th anniversary set where you got Undertaker in his classic, grey gloves
The
and
great love, yeah.
Razor Ramon, and the 123 Kid as the Lightning Kid.
Oh wow.
So I haven't seen the Lightning Kid one any other. Well, I have seen him, but I thought it was a single one you could buy. But by all accounts, I think it only really came with that set, which sounds like a great set. It comes with also a money bag, $10,000. Remember that challenge match he
Yes,
had, the
that was
return
great.
match? So yeah, so that to
Where
me,
he
that's
almost
got
killed himself with that missed
yeah, I
moonsault
know,
to the
yeah.
outside.
What he did, yeah. You won't see that nowadays. Really, they're so careful. They're just, they can't take risks like that, or they don't take
Well,
risks like
also
that.
like I could tell you like the order of some matches or where events happened.
Mm,
And like if you ask me, like I'm a big AEW fan. I love
okay.
AEW. If you
Mhm.
ask me what the opening match for full year 2021 was, I don't know. But if you ask me what the opening match for SummerSlam '89 was, it was Brainbusters against Heart Foundation.
Absolutely. There you go. There you go. I had a great bit of trivia that I brought out a few years ago on my page, and I used it I think as a quiz question on one of my other shows with a couple of my guests, and it really got them stumped. It's great. It's the IC title changed hands pretty much every the first 10 WrestleMania, first 10 SummerSlams. It changed hands at all bar two, but only one guy was responsible for retaining the IC title at SummerSlam on both
Sean,
of those occasions. Sean, yeah, exactly.
it's
And when I
Henning and
realized that, I
Razor.
was yeah. When I realized that, I was like, because I was just going through. I was like, yeah, changed hands at 88 and then 89, and I was going through them all. I thought SummerSlam's got a bit of a thing with the IC title until it gets to Shawn Michaels, and yeah.
It
So
was like Mania with the tag titles. When they were defended, it wasn't until five that they
that's a good
the
point. Actually, never realized that.
champions,
Yeah,
because even six, seven, eight, I think there was a count out. I'm not sure what
yeah, it
happened
was
there.
count out. Yeah,
Yeah. And then
nine
nine was
nine it was
also a
just
count out.
DQ on because obviously
DQ.
Hogan was involved and he couldn't. Yeah. There we go. There's probably another show we could do there where we go through mistakes made at pay-per-views or something, And,
Or original lineups, like how Survivor Series would always have somebody that was
yes,
replacing somebody else.
absolutely. Yeah, there was definitely a few of those where Barry Windham was meant to be there, wasn't he? In
Yep.
'89, yeah, and he got replaced by Earthquake. I think was it
Yeah.
Earthquake? Can't remember.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah,
Canadian earthquake at that time.
Canadian Earthquake. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Listen,
remember asking this question on one of the Facebook groups, and then what would have been the funniest outcome for Mania 4 in the title tournament?
okay.
And I thought it would have been Bravo and Reed. Like that would
In
have
the
been
final.
yeah, that would have
That would have really screwed a few people's plans up, wouldn't it? If they,
yeah,
yeah, if they had gone with
just
that. Jeez,
it's like
I'd
tailoring 93. What would have been the like, or if everybody who won their qualifying match actually lost, and you still have
what were the
Brett because he
reverse
got the
brackets?
yeah.
Yeah, that's right. He got seeded, didn't he? Yeah, so fair enough. But what the rest of it look like? Oh God, yeah,
So it would
that
have
would
been
be.
Brett and Backlund in the opener, and then Doink and
Who's he
who did
against
Mr.
again?
Hughes beat?
Oh,
Was it Kamala?
yes, it was Kamala. Yes,
Yeah, so you have Doink and
Doink and
Kamala.
Kamala.
Who did and then
So, Tatanka and Luger. So Tatanka went over Giant Gonzalez,
and
and
Luger beat Tito, I think.
No, Razor beat Tito.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah. So, but Luger beat Backlund. There you go.
Luger
So
beat
it would have been
Backlund. Okay.
Brett and El Matador, and then it would have been Giant Gonzalez and Tito. No, Giant Gonzalez and
Backlund.
Backlund. God, that would have been a dire one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so you had Gonzalez and maybe Kamala in the finals. There's your king of the ring.
I tell you what, mate. I think we picked our topic next time we do this because that would be so funny to go back and try to
Just
like.
like fantasy booking, like the worst possible cards that we
That
could.
would have been what could have happened if it all went opposite. I mean, it works with tournaments, I think, more than anything because of the format. We've already taken apart King of the Ring a few years ago. That was great. Um, we
And I
could
was thinking, like, what happens if they would have done Survivor Series a year before, like Survivor Series '86 or Royal Rumble '87
yeah, right.
or
That's a
or
good
Mania
shout.
in '84.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Survivor Series would be a really interesting one to look at.
Especially the tag teams, like
Yes.
trying to get 10 teams in.
Yeah.
Like you have to like make concessions. Like you have to say like maybe Stud doesn't leave right away, and you have Stud and Bundy there, and the machines are still around.
God, that would be. See, I look at the tag team scene. I've said this many times. The tag team scene, I felt of the NWA and WCW for many, many years was far superior to what the WWF had.
Oh yeah,
When you had the likes of the Road Warriors, you have Freebirds,
rock
Steiners,
and roll.
Rock and Roll Express, Midnight Express, all there at the same time. And then when you look at what the WWF had on at that same time, yeah, I mean, it's yeah,
It was
hard to.
very mid card. I found that the tag
Mm,
teams in WCW/NWA, you could see the Road Warriors in the main event. It wouldn't look out of
mm,
place.
no,
You could see Hogan like squashing the Hart Foundation.
yeah,
Nobody's
wouldn't work.
squashing the Road Warriors.
No, that's a good point. There was nobody, even Demolition. No, sorry, Powers of Pain were their closest ones, weren't they, to the Road Warriors?
Yeah,
I think, and even they. Funnily enough, I watched Clash of Champions one the other night for the first time, and that's with the
that
Road
holds
Warriors
up.
and Powers of Pain. It's good, yeah, yeah. I don't know why it's taken me so long to watch it, but I've only found it since this WCW channel has come up.
Oh,
Um,
did you see the most recent one where they had that UK house show from I don't think it was Manchester's, might have been Liverpool. I'm not sure.
okay.
The main event was Sting and Orndorff. It was when Sting beat Vader for the world title
Oh,
in
okay.
I think it
Yeah,
was Dublin, and then
yeah,
he lost it at the end of the tour. But
yeah. So
you
he
had
was the
Vader and
champion then again.
Cactus, Rude and Van Hammer, and I just love house shows without commentary because I find it's more timeless.
Yeah,
It doesn't date itself. Like you could sit down and watch a house show from '86, and it if there's no commentary talking about current events, then it just
yeah.
feels like it could have happened yesterday.
I think it's the first the thing I found really odd the first time I went to see wrestling live, especially because it
No
was
commentary.
WWF as well, is it was all playing out, and I said, "This is weird." I've got to try and almost picture what is being said in my head because it's just so odd. I got used to it more now, but it's a very very odd feeling. Same when you go to football matches over here, I suppose if you're not used to it. It's Andrew, mate, this has been amazing. Thank you again so much for your time. I am going to give a shout out to your TikTok at the minute. So yeah, I'll let you give a shout out. Actually, get people to go and check you out because if they liked hearing us talk about wrestling figures here, you do TikTok audience a service like that as
Yeah,
well.
sure. I review wrestling figures on my TikTok. I When I was first getting into TikTok, trying it was like trying to put as much stuff against the wall, seeing what sticks.
Yeah,
And was more of a ranter. I would have something come into my mind while I was walking and just make a video. And then I thought, I've got a bunch of wrestling figures. Maybe I could talk about that. And then I started just getting figures for the sole purpose of reviewing them, and that's where I'm at now.
that's
After
very
this,
good.
I'm making a plan to go out to Burnaby and get a figure. I may or may not. It's raining and that tends to keep me inside, but
Gotta
yeah,
get the content there, Andrew. Come on.
that's what my life is like. Because initially I was putting them out every day, and there's like now I'm out of figures. So now,
I was going to ask that actually. Did you start off reviewing your collection, then you've reached a point at which you had no more?
yeah. So
Um,
anytime I do a review now, it's a new figure, new to
okay.
me anyway.
which is quite cool. I mean, it drops onto my my feed because obviously the more that I obviously knew you anyway, but then the more that I've watched them, the more that dropped onto my feed. I'm not on TikTok all the time, but I do look forward to when your face pops up. I'm like, oh, who is it going to be today? You know, and they are short, they're snappy. You know, you don't beat around the bush with it. You say what you think about it, give it a rating, move on.
Yeah.
It's great. I really love it. You know, well done. So, you know, and there's such a range of that. You a lot of them were LJNs, obviously, because that's what you have. But then these odd ones popped up, the like really recent ones, AEW ones that I don't know about that I'm invested all of a sudden. So
Oh,
yeah,
I've got friends who don't even watch wrestling, and
really.
they just did a change of it. Like, there's one girl I knew. She's like, "How come you never give them low ratings? They're always like, it was all right, 8.3." It was like,
Where's the
you
point
should
come
go
from? I
below
think
5.
that's really technical. Where does the point come from? Anything you got? It's just a gut feeling, kind of. You
I
know.
don't know until like I don't think about it beforehand. It just no
Fair enough.
filter, just comes out of my mouth, and then I
Cool.
just okay, that's what it must be then.
Do you do anything else? I know you had didn't you have some stuff on YouTube that you and a mate used to talk about?
Yeah, a
Was it from
buddy of
Abyss to
mine.
Zenk or something? Is
Well,
have
we
I got that
changed
right?
it. I am wearing an Abyss shirt, but
That's one.
we changed it to Abdullah to Zinc because we figured we're never going to get around to doing Abyss matches. We're not going to watch TNA
Fair
stuff.
dues.
And we wanted to stretch it out because I was completely content with reviewing every Tom Zink match we could find. And
Okay.
then once we finished that, find another wrestler. But Scott, he's got ADHD and he gets bored very quickly, and he needs to move on to the next thing. Like his
Hmm.
next thing now is he wants to discuss the rustling sleaze thread. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
No.
Um, in the early 2000s, early to mid 2000s, on the Death Valley Driver video review message board, this guy by the name of Coach Tony K, who
Hmm.
nobody knew at the time was Tony Khan. Um,
Okay.
he said, "Does anybody have any sleaze stories, sleazy stories about the underbelly of pro wrestling?" And before you knew
Okay.
it, I remember I was online at the time when this happened. I used to always like hit refresh to see any new topics, new
Right.
posts, and it became a monster. And
Okay. That sounds.
that's where the whole rumors about Randy Savage and Stephanie started.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And then there was like the stuff with the I don't know if I don't know how I'll try to keep it as PG as possible, but apparently Jimmy Valiant had a lady of the evening in his hotel room, and she was squatting over a glass table while he was underneath it, and she was relieving herself. And the Rock and Roll Express walked in, and apparently Ricky was like, "Oh, I'm getting out of here," and Robert said, "Okay, I'll see you around. I'm gonna stick around and watch."
Oh no.
And I remember when I read that, I was like, "There's no way Ricky Morton left."
Yeah. Not that you would admit it now, but no. That's really interesting because I was thinking there you were going to go off into some sort of dark side of the ring type thing, but this sounds like a real kind of yeah, really ropey
And it's
stuff.
like Chinese telephone, like how much of it is
Yeah,
actually true, but it's wrestling, so I'm not putting anything by anything.
fair enough. Sounds good. Listen, mate. Thank you so much for coming in again. We will do it again. Let's keep your record going. You know, third time's
Yeah,
a
I
charm,
look
as they
forward
say.
to it. I have a lot of different topics circulating in this
That's
head.
cool. No, we'll bat some around and we'll definitely get something else happening because I'm very keen to get this back to delving into the fandom side of things as well because I think I've kind of abandoned that a little bit over the years and I'm really keen to just delve back into some fun stuff. So we'll do that. Listen, mate. All the best. Stay on after I hit stop. Obviously, don't
Okay,
just drop off. But
sure,
cool. Thank you, mate, and I shall speak to you again.
you got it.
If you enjoyed this episode, please take a moment to like, share, and hit the subscribe button. Also follow us on Facebook and Instagram at Once Upon a Turnbuckle to keep updated about all future shows.